we're just waiting for Lisa to join us. So if you just give us a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Where's your tie, Chair?
Pardon?
Where's your tie and your jacket and?
My jacket's behind me, Brian. It's
Why? No tie? Guys, look at that. I've made a bloody big effort.
Before, Brian. It's very...
Made a big effort this morning to get dressed up for you, and you're sitting there, no tie.
The two of us in the same boat.
The webcast has now started.
Oops.
So if we can all mute, please, so we get no interference. Lisa has now joined us. So again, good morning. If we move on to agenda item number 1, which is apologies. We've had no apologies. No. We've had no apologies. Agenda item number 2, moving on to declaration of interest. Is Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available online. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Any declarations of interest? Matthew, you've got your hand up. Is it?
Apologies, Chair. It's not. I can't see my hand up. Apologies.
All right, it's a white hand on the right hand side. Okay, thank you, Matthew. Moving on then to agenda item number 3, which is urgent matters. Notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972. I've had no urgent matters, so we'll move on then.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to confirm there are no urgent matters.
And thank you, Gary. Moving on then to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which are on pages 7 to 18. I'll just go through the pages first of all, and then go back for any matters arising. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18. That was a long meeting, if we remember, members. Any matters arising from those minutes? Paul, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of matters, if I may, please. The end of item 5, Care Inspectorate Wales Assurance Check 2021. The resolution says that following the Care Inspectorate Wales review of the action plan, a report be presented back to the committee for consideration. I couldn't find it in the forward work programme.
Lisa, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think whether it's Frodry or Steph, I don't know who's coordinating the forward work programme, could add that.
Can I? Sorry, Chair, I was playing hokey cokey with my mute button then. Can I suggest that we log that, and when we get to the forward work programme item on today's agenda, that we make sure that we insert it in the appropriate place? Would that be okay?
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Two other matters. Under minutes internal audit update, third paragraph, there is reference for the secondment being extended to June 2022. But there is reference elsewhere in the minutes to what's, in terms of risk and so on, what's been called direction of travel. Now, I'm just conscious of what, as it were, the direction of travel of COVID, being optimistic maybe. Can we think about, or can we have any detail of whether that June 2022 is going to be an end date, or whether it may yet be extended? Because I do feel that internal audit resource has been under enormous pressure, like everybody else, for goodness sake. It was just a thought, that was all, because June 2022 isn't far away in some ways.
What's your views on that?
Yeah, I think June 2022 will mean that Bob Chowdhury's worked with Test, Trace, Protect as the business manager there for 2 years. So it was a comment for 2 years. So I think we have spoken, and obviously he's doing a great job with the TTP project, but we do miss him in internal audit, and we'd like to have him back as soon as possible. So that's what we're working towards. That will be come back to us. And, yeah, by that date as the latest, hopefully.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chair. My final question is under the same heading, 4 paragraphs from the end, there is reference to the contract audit report and compliance with CPRs. And specifically, there is reference to, it was agreed at CET that a regular report would be presented to demonstrate compliance with CPRs. My question is, how regular, and who is going to receive that report?
Sorry, Chair, is it okay if I respond?
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, CET will receive that report. So CET is the Chief Executive, the Corporate Directors, the Monitoring Officer, and the Section 151 Officer. And it's intended that that will be done quarterly.
Okay.
And then if there are issues arising out of that, then CET can raise that with SLT, which is the Senior Leadership Team, which is all of the heads of service.
Yes. Yes.
So that's the oversight that we're intending to do, to take it to CET on a quarterly basis, and then if there are issues arising, pick them up with SLT.
And if necessary, it could be escalated back here or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else have any matters arising from the minutes? No. Can I have somebody to recommend those minutes and a seconder, please? Martin recommends and Ellie seconds. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 5, which is Ddinbych County Council delivering environmental ambitions. That's on pages 19 to 68. Who wants to start with it? Is Brian, are you leading on this?
It would appear so. As the lead member, you'd say I should lead on it, shouldn't I? But with us this morning, in no particular order, we got Alan Smith, Head of Service, as well as the biodiversity element of the climate change strategy. So he'll probably say a quick few words after I've finished here now. And Andrew Cutts is with us this morning. You might be aware that he's taken over the role from Helen Vaughan-Evans while she's on a maternity leave, and so I would imagine he's pretty nervous this morning because this topic, climate change, and the way that it's progressed from July 19, when we declared the climate and ecological emergency, it's a pretty intense piece of work, but I'm sure he'll be okay. I've had a couple of 3 meetings with him already to bed him in, and so he's eager this morning to answer any questions about the report, which was an Audit Wales report, You have to say when you read it, it is a good report and doesn't sit well with a lot of authorities, but we are on the front line, Denbighshire, with our climate change strategy. I was in a meeting with Lee Waters, the Deputy Climate Minister, with in attendance a lot of the authorities from across Wales, and he made reference to Denbighshire and how well we've done. So we declared the emergency and we've done something about it. And we have to give credit to the cross-party working with that climate change group that was put together, chaired by Councillor Graham Timms, and it's absolutely worked well. And I was glad that he took up the chairmanship of that group. And then we can't ignore the efforts of Helen Vaughan-Evans in the first instance and the team that's been built up around her. And when you look at the report, we have to be big enough to take it on the chin. There is recommendations in there, but you'll know in the report we've responded to the recommendations, and we're going to take action to the recommendations from this Audit Wales report. So we can't rest on our laurels. Everything we've done, we'll accept most of it is inward facing. So the challenges going forward, without moving away from this report, is in the next council that we start looking outward from Denbighshire County Council on what we can do to assist with the climate change emergency. And we can do things, and we need to make sure we stay in the headlights, because we won't be able to fund it off our own back. We need the funding from ultimately Welsh Government and any other stakeholders that come along. And we need to take advantage of any opportunities, and we've burnt the midnight oil, Helen Vaughan-Evans, some of the officers, that we really need to have our eyes and our ears open to the opportunities, because they will be there, and we need to get our projects already shovel ready, whoever said that's a bit back in time, so that when these grant fundings become available, we're ready to jump straight in. And actually you can put projects forward before there's any funding available, and that way you're on the front line of being able to push the boundaries and make a massive difference. I've said this before, when we declared the climate emergency and we put together the political climate change group, it was hard to see, you know, how could we in Denbighshire sort of save the planet? Well, obviously we can't, but what's transpired since that day is that we are making a difference, we can make a difference, and if we're a little cog in a big wheel and the rest of the wheel gets on board with it, you will see the difference eventually. So in the next council, I think we need to put it at the forefront of what's happening, and I think that will be there with discussions that are going on at the moment, corporate plan. I think that there should be a dedicated cabinet role to climate change, because it will develop to that level, and I've already made that suggestion. At grassroots, and I think this is important, the returning members of this council that do get re-elected, the political groups need to get hold of the template and instruct the new councillors in carbon literacy and get in there the grassroots with them, so that whatever the percentage of new members is in the next council, they get on board with this journey that we've started, and it pushes forward, and we don't leave the momentum. So on a bit of a soapbox here, but I think a couple of important points that I need to make. I've become passionate about it. I've sat on quite a number of meetings outside because we get invited, because we put a strategy together and people wanted to hear about it. So I get all passionate and enthusiastic about the climate change topic, which hopefully you can make out from the way I'm speaking at the minute. But anyway, without further ado, I'll ask Councillor Tony Thomas. He might want to chip in on the biodiversity side. And then I've already mentioned Alan Smith's here, Head of Service, and Andrew Cutts, who's the main man in the hot seat at the moment. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Who wants to come in next? Is Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Brian, for that comprehensive overview of what we've been doing. A couple of things I would like to mention, some initiatives that we've had with Denbighshire. Certainly the wildflower meadow situation that we have, we've got about 60 going at the moment. I'm hoping to try and double that in the near future. So we have equivalent of about 30 football fields going on throughout the county. So that's quite an interesting one with all the species. There is a few.
Tony, can you turn your video off? You're breaking up badly. We just.
Am I? Okay. Okay, so I was talking about the Wildflower Meadow Projects initiative with Denbighshire. I mean, that's going quite well, and people need to appreciate it does take a bit of time. The other thing I wanted to mention also was that Denbighshire now has its own tree nursery. We're producing 5,000 trees a year. Hopefully this is going to combat the various tree diseases. So we're really going well on this sort of initiative. So that's just a couple of things that's going on. That's enough for me, and no doubt we'll pass over to the officers for Alan Smith next, please. Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. The members have set out the background and some of our achievements to the report. I think Brian's right to say it's a positive report. In a moment, we'll go through the management action plan, which has come from it, but just to the key elements of their findings are set out in the accompanying report, which is that we've moved very quick. They think we've moved very quickly to embed our environmental ambitions, and we've also allocated very significant resources, although they caveat that with saying that the full cost of pursuing our ambition for net carbon zero by 2030 is not known yet, and we'll come back to that one. That they think we've communicated very well with our citizens, trying to inform them and let them know what's going on and change behaviour. But we could probably do a bit more in that area. They think we've worked very hard to train councillors and staff, and many of you will have been on the training course that we've put on, and I think a lot of people have found it very positive. And we've also put some baseline measures in place so that we can actually understand the impact of what we're doing, which will be particularly critical over the next. After all, it was an 8-year strategy now, but it was a 9-year strategy. So it is, given the complexity of it all and so much change, we do need to understand what's going on. So overall, it was a very positive report, and they complimented us on a lot of things we did. They also raised some of the things that we need to think about in the future, some of the perhaps the bigger discussions we need to have, and some of the issues we need to face, particularly to do with workforce and resource planning. The fact we don't completely know how well the things we're going to do, we're doing at the moment, how well they'll work, and also that although we have communicated, we've done a lot of work on communication, there are still areas where people are not aware of the agenda, and we need to get to them as well. So the report made 10 recommendations for improvement, and as Brian said, you know, we absolutely accept all of them. We think they're very constructive, and probably the right things to be set out. And we'll certainly be turning our attention to them over the next 8 to 9 months, perhaps a year. What we've done is devised a management response to the recommendations, which is particularly is very detailed. I've asked Andrew Cutts, who's standing in now for Helen for the next for the period of maternity leave, to take you through what we're doing, how we're going to respond and react to the recommendations at a fairly high level of detail. You're welcome to ask questions about them, just so you get an understanding of where Audit Wales are suggesting improvement, and what our response is to that, and how we propose to meet those recommendations. So with your permission, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Andrew Cutts, who will take us through the management plan, which is in your document pack. That's okay.
Thank you, Alan. And welcome, Andrew. Obviously, you've got big shoes to fill, but I'm sure you'll be able to do that, mate. So over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Bordar Paub. Apologies for having my video off. I've got an intermittent internet connection at present, so hopefully it works. Do let me know if it breaks up, please. As Alan mentions, we have 10 recommendations have been made through the report, which is positive overall because it allows us an opportunity to reflect, develop further and learn from that and take the programme forward on a positive footing. I'll just go through them briefly. They are included in Appendix 2, so by all means, if you have any questions, do ask them. Recommendation 1 suggests that we amend the wording in the financial section of the strategy. This has already been completed and it essentially says that we will look to cover costs. We expect around about £9 million in total to deliver the projects. We suspect that this similar investment will be required every 3 years as we break up the programme into 3-year portions. Recommendation 1.2 is review the identified funding requirements to make sure that sufficient money has been assigned to the strategy. We've completed an appraisal for the 22-23 year, and Budget Board and Cabinet briefing have worked through this. We have a medium-term financial plan for the years 3 and 4, but of course we must note that local authority budgets are set annually. Recommendation 1.3 is to produce a workflow plan for the programme to identify roles and areas that may be under-resourced. We've completed for 2022-23, and we've costed an additional 5.5 full-time equivalent staff, and these have been entered into the draft council budget. Consideration is also going to be given to the ecologically positive goals to make sure that this gets equal parity with the carbon focus, and that may include likes of recruiting trained staff such as ecologists. We take communications with citizens, of course, seriously, and under recommendation 2.1, they suggest that we undertake a formal analysis of existing and potential partners. These partnerships change over the lifetime of the strategy, so therefore horizon scanning will also be included. Recommendation 2.2, we undertake the stakeholder mapping exercise in the communications plan. This process is underway, and colleagues Liz Wilcox-Jones and Sean Owen from communications team are carrying this out at the present. Recommendation 3.1 is to review the service areas and how they can clarify the impact of the environmental ambitions on their workforce's daily work. I'll be working on this with colleagues in the programme team and to be completed by December 22. We've written a workshop and trialled it with positive feedback, and we'll also engage with frontline staff to ensure they're included, because of course inclusivity and empowerment is key to success of this programme. Recommendation 4.1 is to reinforce the ecologically positive goal alongside the net carbon zero goal. Programme Board and communications team will work on this important aspect, and a further 1.5 full-time equivalent dedicated staff will be recruited in communications from April 22. Just a few more to go. Recommendation 4.2, following on the service areas that reported low levels of awareness and not seeing the guidance on the environmental ambitions. This is particularly important to engage with schools, the entire school community, including pupils, staff and their families, and Ddinbych Leisure Limited. We will meet and work with Head of Education Services and the Chair of Head Teachers Forum. And the last two, recommendation 4.3, produce and communicate a plan to roll out training as wide as possible through the organisation on carbon literacy. I'm sure many of you have attended the carbon literacy delivered last year. It was widely positively received. We'll make sure that this is rolled out to new council members to also receive training. And there is an e-learn module on climate change available on the internet. And finally, recommendation 4.4, produce and communicate a plan to develop training on ecological literacy. Myself and colleagues in the programme team will lead on this through the completion of a plan. A one-day training course is to be made available for up to 250 learners with a toolbox talk as a kit developed and delivered to frontline staff to make sure that everybody across the board is included and empowered in this journey that we're now on. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Did Alan want to come back? Brian or Tony, before I open up to members for questions?
Yeah, Chair. Okay, just to say well done to Andrew there, and hopefully I haven't gone over the top by saying he must have been pretty nervous about this because it's a big subject to take the reins over from. But you came across there well, Andrew. So well done, and I'm sure you won't have any problems over the next 9 months, 12 months, whatever it'll be. So well done, and obviously well done to the soon departing Mr. Alan Smith.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Nothing further from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, open it up to members. Dave Wilson from.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not used to being blown off course, but that was I've never seen an introduction like that before. That was really good. I just wanted to add to that for those of you that who are familiar with our work, I think you'll struggle to find a report where we've concluded that the council is making excellent progress. But we have concluded that in this particular instance. We recognised when we planned the work that you were in your early stages of the review. And I can imagine that some councils may have preferred us to wait until you got further down the line. But the officers were keen that we carried on with the review, and we did it. So I think that's a credit. What we found was positive. I'm not going to go through all the conclusions again, all the recommendations. I think you've had all that information presented to you really well. Only to say that the management information, the performance management that's referred to. I just think we need to be clear that the first year of your performance reporting is 21-22, and we are still in 21-22. So there is no criticism intended with that. It's just a matter of fact that that's where you are and that you need to take things forward. So I don't think there's anything else for me to say really, Chair, but I just wanted to add those last couple of things in.
Thank you, David. Just to explain to members who are not usually on the group, Dave Wilson is from Audit Wales. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Ellie, you wanted to come in?
I've got one question and one good remark. On page 12 in Appendix 1, the collecting of the green email addresses, I thought that was a great idea. Is it Andrew and Helen? So yes, that's good because input from our residents is vital. Then Appendix 2, the carbon literacy training, only 200 members of staff, but I did hear that there's an e-learning. So I think that's good to know. So because the more staff we've got to know about carbon and everything, it is essential. So, you know, letting all the staff plus residents know what we're doing is good. So those are only my two remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. I think Alan will be able to say that the intention is for all staff to be trained in some form. I think, if I'm right in saying that the 250 is just the first tranche, is it, Alan?
Yeah, yes, Chair, you're quite right. We had a dedicated training course available, which we bought in, and so because of that, we had to identify. We had a slight limit on the number, and we aimed it at staff and members, and we had very good levels of participation, but we obviously need to go further than that. So, Ellie, yes, you're right. We're going to have an e-learning module which will be available to all staff, and one of the benefits of the Audit Wales work was they surveyed staff to find to look at uptake of training across the council. And we found it a little bit varied. Some services showed a lot more interest than others. So we're going to target our training in this coming year to particular areas where people perhaps haven't had the time and so on. So it's a very important area, and yes, the new training will be much more accessible, Ellie, which we certainly hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Well, first and foremost, I think we should welcome this report. It shows that we have, as a council, made great strides in this particular area. And I think the one thing that just concerns me a little, obviously, when we look at the overall costs for this project, I'm hoping, yes, that we can actually get extra funding from the Welsh Government when the time comes. Brings me back to remembering the 21st Century Schools project, where because we as a council had our plans well mapped out early on, we actually were able to get quite a bit of grant funding from Welsh Government because we were prepared. And this is half the battle these days, isn't it? As local authorities, if we're prepared and we have plans in place, then hopefully we should be able to tap, sort of tap into some of that funding from Welsh Government to help balance out what will really be quite a considerable amount of cost. 9 million every sort of so many months or so, years, and 27 million comes to mind somewhere in that report overall. So that's quite a considerable input. Just as a question there, obviously I appreciate that a lot of this may be to do with, for example, converting our fleets of vehicles into electric vehicles or hybrids or whatever. But where else? What are the key pressure areas for us in relation to the budgets? As I say, I hope we can tap into other funding for that. My other point is the communication really with our residents. I think we are doing a good job. We need to publish that as often as we can, and as councillors, I think we have our role to play in that. But also, what can we be doing to ask residents to take part in this journey, i.e. planting trees and things like that. I also, I've raised this before, I have concerns that some things are outside our control. Unfortunately at the moment in my ward, Natural Resources Wales are currently felling acres and acres of larch trees because they're diseased. And so we will be losing, quite an area of woodland that will have an impact environmentally for us for some time. But also I've raised before the question of, and this is where engaging with other people is important, we also have lots of woodlands, established woodlands in the county, which have been sold off over the last few years in small parcels. And under the current rules and regulations, they are allowed to fell so many cubic meters a year. Well, if all these small parcels in a woodland felled their 5 cubic meters or whatever it is a year, we would lose that woodland quite quickly. So I just think we need to be getting the message out there that everybody can do their bit. And if you've bought some woodland anywhere in Denbighshire, please bear in mind that we have a target to achieve in planting trees. So I think that's all I have to say at the moment. One final point, in relation to the verges and our meadows, in rural areas we have vast amounts of verges. And sadly, over the years, many of the wildflowers have disappeared, probably because previous councils have used herbicides and things like that to keep the grasses down. And in many cases now we have barren verges because there's nothing in them growing, but possibly in many cases hogweed and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see whether long term as a council we can do more to seed our verges and lanes, so that hedgerows and things like that, so that we're actually getting some colour back into the countryside. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Does anybody want to come back on Martin's views there?
I can come back on some of it, Chair. I may hand over to more expert people, I think. On the costs, we are investing in modernising our buildings. You'll have seen investment in schools, but also in our council buildings, improving boilers, lighting, insulation, and so on. And that is a significant task. also, as Martin said, we have a program of switching to electric vehicles, and generally improving infrastructure. We're also needing to invest in land for carbon sequestration, so there's costs there. There's a range of costs, and there are expenses involved in it. There are some paybacks in terms of energy efficiency, but some things are just more expensive, and I think that's part of the debate here, is that to pursue this policy properly actually sometimes means some difficult choices for us, in that doing things properly might be more expensive in some cases. And I think the council is taking those things on the chin. I'm sure Steve can give us much greater detail about exactly where all that money is going, and we can refer to him if need be. Instead of the ash, well, you mentioned larch, Martin, but obviously ash dieback is a problem as well if you mean those. And I think balancing those pluses and minuses is always a difficult thing, and I think that's where community leadership does come in terms of trying to understand, trying to persuade people to think differently about these things, and to consider the environment differently. Verges, I think Andrew can probably fill us in on that. My understanding is if we just leave them alone, they do start to come back as natural features, and that might be one of the answers. But I know we are also looking at our spraying policy for roadside edges and so on, and Tony and his team are going to bring a paper back to scrutiny on that subject later in the year, about how we can reduce the use of glycophosphate and other very harmful things which we're probably using to excess at the moment. Again, there might be a cost to that, but in terms of the ecology, that's something that we, again, a decision we might need to take. So I'll refer to colleagues Andrew and Steve to give you more detail for some of your answers if need be, Martin. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, can I just come back on that one? I think in rural areas, often one of the complaints I get is that the verges are growing too high, the grass is getting out of control, and there's certain weeds that have taken over, like hogweed. I think that half the battle would be won if actually the verges were colourful. If they were full of wildflowers, I think there would be a different debate going on. But thank you for that. And actually, Mr. Chairman, I did actually slip up there. I didn't mention ash dieback, but I know, because you all know my ward, I think every other tree in my ward is an ash tree, and we are waiting for the results of the surveys that have been done on that issue, because we may be losing a lot of very mature trees for health and safety reasons in the next few years. And it's good that as a county that we have the ability now to replace those trees. And when we do lose them in a hedgerow, it's important that we try and put them back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Andrew, did you want to come back on the verges?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Holland. Apologies if I missed a portion, but my internet connection is playing up, unfortunately. But essentially, in terms of the trees and diseases and the wildflower verges, or verges in general, of course, they're all interconnected. It's just our human way to name and potentially isolate things in our mind and physically sometimes. We all have a role to play within the council and externally, stakeholders across the county, members of the public, in terms of our movements, the way that we use the landscape, our role in preventing pathogens and diseases to spread across the landscape. And this all comes down to greater communication and raising awareness. And of course, in my former role, main role of tree officer, and now in my current role, climate change program officer, program manager, we'll strive to do this better, include feedback from stakeholders, and of course, as has been mentioned already, eco-literacy, to bring it alongside and bring it up to the same level as carbon literacy, so that people don't feel bamboozled by perhaps some terms. Biodiversity as a term is used widely, but not everybody actually understands the background to it. So essentially, the more people we can involve, the more people that engage with us and allow us to share this important focus, it will couple them with the climate change, because ultimately climate change is playing an overarching, unfortunately, detrimental impact upon these habitat structures, trees, woodlands, verges, etc. So we will take these comments on board, and we will look to engage with as wide an audience as possible and empower them, really, because what they can do on their local patch, and the more they understand it and cherish it, change it from green space to colourful spaces where appropriate, I'm sure we can strive to do great things really across the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, Martin. Yeah, can you take your hand back down now, Martin? Thanks. And then moving on to Rhys.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, can I apologise for my late arrival? I'm chairing Denbigh Town Council later on today, and our pre-meeting overran this morning, so I apologise for that. I've noted that this report does have an excellent in the introduction, and I'm very pleased about that. And I'm also sorry that I've missed the presentation. And I'm a bit concerned that I might ask questions that have already been discussed and is clear to everybody else. I've got a couple of questions maybe on page 9 of this report. Martin has touched on one of them. I've also, well, I think I've always been aware that this strategy is going to be very costly in the short term. There will be benefits, not just to the environment, but financially down the line. But Martin is quite right. There's mention of 27 million there and 9 million over the next 3 years. And I agree completely with what Martin says. If Denbighshire can be ahead of the curve on this, then it would be good to be able to draw down external grant funding rather than the prudential borrowing. So that's just a statement. I don't think there's an answer that I require. The next bullet point but one talks about the biodiversity team. Maybe I missed on this. Is the biodiversity team the same as countryside services? Are they one and the same? Or are we talking of different offices there? Maybe this was explained earlier and I missed that. If so, I apologize, because one of the concerns there is to see that there is a risk for future capacity. And maybe we have discussed the answer to that one. So those were my concerns. My final point or question, as somebody who taught science and biology for many years and who also worked for volunteered for Denbighshire Countryside Services at one point, worked for the biodiversity officer in Conwy and also worked for the National Trust. I'm also very, very aware of the influence that young people, especially primary school children, can have on the behaviour of their parents and their families. And it was disappointing to notice on one of the bar charts the lack of knowledge amongst, I presume, a small number of school teachers who replied about the direction in which Denbighshire's policies are going. That was a disappointment, because I know that those teachers, maybe who did not take part in this, are very, very positive and are teaching about these very things to their children in their forest schools and with all things to do with the environment. So I'm glad to see that that is going to be, I think, one of the priorities, working with schools, with young people, in order to bring the population along with us on this journey. Okay, thank you, Barry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Does anybody want to answer Rhys' question? Because I'd like to know as well. The biodiversity team, is it the same as Countryside Services?
I think I should refer that one to Andrew. He will probably know better than me.
Thank you. The biodiversity team comprises at present Joel Wally, Liam Blasey and Katie Piercy, and they sit within Countryside and Heritage.
Thank you.
So yes, Chair, they are separate. Could I just referring, if you don't mind, the Reese's discussion about young people. It was raised in the survey that that school teachers didn't seem very aware of our policy, and that does seem a bit of a mismatch, because my knowledge of schools is that green environmental issues are taken very seriously by teachers and young people. It's always been a very strong thread in any consultation we do, is what young people are saying about the environment. So we know they care about it. And I think that their teachers do as well. What we're seeing is not a great awareness of what the council's actually doing in that way. It's not that they're not doing anything. So I think we need to bridge that gap really, and link up the two things so that people understand that we're both working on that agenda. And I think when we saw Dinas Bran and the improvements which came through our programme, those pupils and teachers were very proud and pleased with what had happened there, the environmental improvements on that school, and I think that's the important thing, is that they're being done and people take ownership of them. But what we need to do is to link up knowledge of our strategy with what is literally going on in schools. But I think there is a lot going on in both areas, Reece. It's just we're not as aware of each other as we could be.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan.
Steve? Yeah, that's correct. If I can jump in there, Barry. Yeah, that is what you said there, Alan. I know 2 schools where you'd be amazed what they're doing, but it's all happened, for want of a better description, under the cover of darkness. But we can, in my opening remarks, we haven't been at this very long. A lot of it's been inward facing. We will get on to looking outside of Denbighshire County Council as opposed to looking inside it. These things will develop, and there is roots there already. On the matter of cost, I've said this a few times, but whether it's fell on deaf ears, climate change, you need to look at it through the glasses of health and safety. Now, when there's health and safety issues, the last thing that's relevant is the cost. That is the last thing. If you've got a health and safety matter in the workplace or wherever, cost is at the bottom of the list. Now, you might say that's foolhardy, but if you accept that climate change is a massive threat, the cost shouldn't govern what you might want to do. I know it's got to be accounted for, and the pounds, shillings and pence need to add up somewhere at the end of the day. But if we're serious about it, and this applies much higher above the tree than where we sit in governments and what have you, they need to make the funding available, and we need to be in the best position to take advantage of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Steve, you wanted to come in? You there, Steve? Yeah.
He's collapsed when he's heard me say, "Don't worry about finance, Chair."
Steve Gadd? You're not coming through, Steve, at all.
Sorry, Chair. Yes,
We're not hearing you at all, Steve.
I think he said he was going to give us an extra £10 million in the next financial year for climate change strategy. I think that's what I heard.
Yeah, Steve's dropped out of the meeting, so he'll probably come back in later. Paul, you've got your hand up, or is that old hand? You're on mute.
Yeah, okay. It was only a thought that occurred to me. It's not directly in the report, but the strategy that the council has for the environment is 10 years, and there's been a lot of talk about trees. Reference to a tree nursery, and I understand the Welsh government is giving a tree to every household in Wales. It's just occurred to me, obviously they grow, and at some point they're going to need maintenance with experienced tree surgeons necessary, and that demand for that resource will increase. And I just wonder to what extent the council is able to build that in and factor it in to its projections, given that you're talking of 2029, 30 and beyond. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. I think the trees for houses will depend on the type of tree, because obviously if trees are going to grow 20, 30 foot, households won't be able to deal with them. Maybe Andrew could answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a good point to raise. Of course, trees will grow in the right conditions, but what we will ensure is that we adhere to the right tree for the right reason in the right place. So people living in that vicinity, locality will be engaged, understand why we're looking to plant trees, choose appropriate trees that not only provide opportunities for biodiversity, carbon sequestration, but look beautiful, hopefully, across the seasons. And then also, sometimes it may be more appropriate to plant one tree that grows particularly large in an open environment, maybe a park or a corner of a school ground, rather than 5 or 6 trees along a street. But of course, each locality will be considered individually and with engagement of the local people. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just come back in, Chair, as well, actually, because I think, Paul, you've raised an interesting question, and it's a wider one than just trees, which is that, yes, in 10 years, 15, 20 years' time, we are going to need more people to maintain the trees which we've planted on our land, let alone people have planted in their gardens. And that's one of the reasons Audit Wales have raised this workforce planning issue, is to try and think about the potential changes in resources we'll need over time. And trees is one of them. It's quite a long-term one. There's perhaps more immediate ones. We've started to talk about net carbon zero building, for example. Well, that means we're going to start to need more people working for us who know how to do that. So there's more than one actual capacity there, which is going to be required over the next 10 years and beyond in the case of trees. So I think what you're talking about is the growth of the green economy. Almost, you know, things are going to change in what people are doing, what people are working on, and particularly in our rural areas, it's probably, you know, it's a sort of hope for the future, in that there will be different jobs available for people and they will need doing, and as a council and as a community we'll have to invest in them. So it does mean change, Paul, and we are starting to think about it, and Audit Wales have raised it, rightly so, you know, because even over the next few years there'll be skills and skill shortages which we'll need to plan to address, either by training our own people or recruiting different ones. So yes, it's a good point. Thank you, Chair.
I shall be recommending a tree surgeon as a future job to my grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Paul. Julian, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not sure whether this was what Steve was going to raise. I'm not sure whether he's managed to get back in or not. But just on the financial situation, just to clarify, and I think both, to be fair, both Brian and Alan have probably picked this up in previous comments as well. Clearly, this is a multi-year, in fact, multi-council programme of works that we've commenced upon and will obviously want to continue through on, and therefore it's going to have a considerable price tag attached to it in terms of actually being able to deliver it. Steve will be working to put in the medium-term financial plan some indicative figures for potential future year costs for that, and I know he's doing that work already. But just to reaffirm, because of the way obviously local government functions, we will need to agree that as part of the budget round every year. So there's always that dichotomy that we're trying to do something on a long-term 10-year basis, but we've got an annual budget cycle that, you know, and we don't necessarily know from one year to the next what the position is going to be. So it's that difficult issue. But just to say that, you know, that the work is being done to develop the medium-term financial plan to incorporate future years' likely drawdown in relation to this programme of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julian. Steve hasn't reappeared, so I want to move.
Chair, I am here. Can everyone hear me now?
Magic, yeah.
I didn't want to put my hand up in case you couldn't hear me, and I thought it's safer just jumping in, and if you could hear me, that would be good. If not, then I was going to start again.
Yeah, go on, Steve.
Covered a lot of what I was going to say. Just to stress that we work really closely with, well, I work really closely with Helen. I have monthly meetings with Helen, and I'm sure I'll start having monthly meetings with Andrew as we build up the budgets for both next year and future years. So it's not something that the programme is doing sort of independently from finance. We're working really closely with them to get the figures in the medium-term financial plan, and those go through all the proper processes. So it goes obviously through budget board and through all the briefings, the council briefings, cabinet briefings, and then obviously ultimately to cabinet and council for approval. I was just going to mention it as well, though the reason why I put my hand up originally was just to mention, and I think other people have actually said some of this, but you know, when we're Martin Smith in our energy department did a really good job at Dinas Bran, it's called Dinas Bran, where the photovoltaics cells were put in. And I know my wife's a teacher actually in that school, and you know, she came in after the day and just said how fantastic the day was, where you know, Martin went in and spoke to every school group and just went through in really, you know, quite a lot of detail what they were doing, why they were doing it, and he got really good feedback. I mean, there was a press release, etc. at the time as well. But just, you know, when we do go to schools, we will be rolling that approach out to, you know, to every school that we are in, and doing improvements to make sure that we get that educational benefit at the same time as actually getting the practical benefit of putting the kit in as well.
Thank you, Steve. I want to move this on. Brian, I see your hand up, but
yeah, just a quick word. Sticking with the finance, what I believe is we'll end up at a gateway at a point in time, which will be a crunch point, where
Thank you, Chair.
what we've been doing on this climate change strategy, we'll come to a crunch point, and I'll give you an example. I've seen a hydrogen boiler, and it will happen. People have got different views on when it might happen, but it will happen. Hydrogen boilers and what they can bring to the decarbonisation. If we had to kit out our housing stock with hydrogen boilers next week, we would be in the Alicante in some respects. So we need to get on a pair of ladders and look with our vision glasses on, when's that going to happen, and what are we going to do to make sure we cover the financial corner. And obviously using that as an example, hydrogen boilers, yeah, there'll be, you would imagine, various grants and what have you, but we need to be thinking ahead and be on the front foot, forward thinking on these changes that will come at us. And I think hydrogen boilers in our housing stock, it'll be a staggering amount of money probably. It can be done. I've seen the mechanics on, and actually all you need is an adapter in your property, and they'll plug the hydrogen boiler into it, and the energy will come through the existing pipework structure. That can be done, but we would have a mammoth task to fund something like that unless we're on the front foot and pushing the boundaries and talking with the people at a higher level, Welsh Government, wherever. So we're on the front line of it all. Thanks, Chair.
okay, thanks, Brian. Any more questions for members in the committee before I ask a member from outside the committee? No? Okay. Merrick, you wanted to come in?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Wel, ga i ddiolch hefyd am yr adroddiad a'r gwaith cymaladwy gan yr adran oll, ac wedi camu ymlaen yn y gwaith yma, a mae'r adroddiad diddorol iawn. Jyst un o ddau o bethau, os gai, dwi'n sylwi bod chi wedi sôn am atodiad 1 a 2. Ar yng nghopi fi, dim wedi'w nodi fel atodiad chwaith. Dyna un peth. Ac mae atodiad 2, sef yr ail un, yn Saesneg yn unig. Tybed pam bod hynny? Ac hefyd, da chi wedi sôn am torri coedwigoedd. Wel, maen nhw fel yd a gwair. Maen nhw'n dod yn barod i'w torri lawr ac yn barod i'w gwerthu. y peth sy'n bwysig ydy'r perchenogion preifat mae'n gorfod ail blannu ar ôl yn nhw werthu'r coed ac yn y blaen. Ac a ddeud hefyd, mae'n yn ysgol yn y ward yn gweithio ar natur, ar hinsawdd, wel, mae'n adroddiadau gwych gynnyn. Dyma ydy dyfodol ein plant, a mae hynny'n bwysig fel sydd wedi cael ei ddweud gan Brian Jones. Ond un peth eich chi gofio, pen ydych chi'n mynd i mewn am unrhyw gyfarpar ffasiwn newydd, mewn blwyddyn neu ddwy fydd o'n hen ffasiwn. A dyna'r broblem, sef gwario ar rhywbeth newydd mwyn dod i fyny ar gofynion. Ond mewn chydig o flynyddoedd fydd yna rhywbeth gwell ar y farchnad a fi eisiau ail wario tro nesaf. Mae hynny yn digwydd, fel ydych chi'n gwybod, yn y byd peirianyddol o hyd. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mr Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Merrick. Gary, do you want to come back on?
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Just i ateb rhai o sylwadau cynghorydd Mary Lloyd Davies. Mae ymddiheuro fod ddim nifer ar atodiadau. Ynglŷn â'r cyfieithiad, mae'r adroddiad gan Ymchwil Cymru wedi cael ei cyfieithu cyn i ni gael o'i cyhoeddi. Dydyn ni ddim o dan ein polisi yn cyfieithu atodiadau fel arfer, a mae'r ail atodiad yn cynllun sydd wedi cael ei paratoi yn fiewnol yn y cyngor, a felly diom yn cael ei cyfieithu fel atodiad i mynd efo'r adroddiad. So, dyna'r safle. Pam mae yna atodiadau sydd wedi cael eu cyfieithu yn barod, da ni wastad yn rhoi yr un Saesneg a'r un Gymraeg i fyny ar y we.
Ga i ddiolch i Gary am yr ymateb yna, ond y broblem oedd bod Archwilio Cymru ar y dudalen atodiad 2, a dyna sydd wedi camarwain fi. Diolch yn fawr.
A rhaid i ni wneud o'n glir tro nesaf, so diolch i chi am y sylwadau.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Merrick. For movement. Martin, have you put your hand back up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a question I think that Merrick raised. In reality, in woodland, woodland owners are allowed to, I think it's fell 5 cubic meters a year without having a license. If they want to fell more than that, they have to have a license. And normally NRW will be involved in that, and there would be a requirement to replace the trees. The big problem is obviously trees that are well established, new trees will take 20, 30 or 40 years to get to that point. And so encouraging these small plot owners of woodland to keep the trees is better than getting them to fell them and then replace them. But just to point that out for Merrick, just to clarify a point there. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, moving on. I've got just a couple of questions. One that probably fall into Andrew's lap, and another one into Steve Gadd's lap. When we're talking about the planting of the wild meadows, I think there's 6 areas that Tony Ward sent out in an email last week for anybody to comment. One of the areas is in my own ward and Tony Thomas's ward, the East Ward of Rhyl, which is the grass verges there by the new sea defences. And I just think it might be a good idea, just around that area, is to do a letter drop to residents and see if any residents would be like to join in the planting at that time. And that time they might take ownership, because we know we've had bad press about these wild meadows looking messy, but people haven't given them the chance, 2 to 3 years to really embed. So I just think it might be a good idea to get residents involved around any area that we're doing. The other one's to Steve, and we know the corporate plan for the next council, again on that, is looking at housing. Obviously, we're always short of housing. I'd really like this council to look, I have mentioned it before, at modular build housing, where these houses are built in factories moved to the services on pavements on the road, and then bricked up on the outside. They come out half as cheap as a normal build house, and are more ecologically valued to the country. So if we could look at both those things, be much appreciated. Moving on then, members, to the recommendations. Oh, sorry, Steve, you want to come back?
I was just going to say, Chair, I mean, that is a project that's ongoing. There's a framework being developed to make sure that the producers of modular timber framed houses are actually built in Wales and use sustainable timber, and that's currently being developed. So we should see some progress on this over the next 12 months and be able to have a framework that we can actually use, and it'll be, as I say, using local skills, local wood and local manufacturing.
You broke up again, Steve, but we did get the point, and that's great news. Thanks very much, Steve. Mark Dixon, you want to come in?
To build our own houses, so that is something that is being looked at currently.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. Just to add to Steve's point, although it's a slightly different arrangement, we are actually building 22 houses in Ddinbych currently, which are on site, which are using modular components, a slightly different system from the one that Steve was describing. But that work is already taking place.
Thank you, Mark. Moving on to recommendations then, that members consider the report, the associated proposals for improvement, and officers' responses, and providing feedback as appropriate. And I think we've done that. I think we give this a real good hearing, which is going to be really important to Ddinbych County Council going forward over the next council. So thank you all, gentlemen, and thank you for the Audit Wales for the report. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Can I just ask, given the topic and the wide interest in it, should it go to all members for information or to scrutiny? Because clearly there's a lot of interest, and if you want to get all members on board, perhaps they should be shared this. Just a thought.
Gary, did you want to come in on that?
Well, I'm sure that Alan and the team would be able to prepare something if members thought that was appropriate to send to all members as a briefing. I'm not sure about it needing to go to scrutiny as such, on the basis it had a good airing here. Clearly, as the action plan continues and things develop with climate change, then there may be individual items that members may want to scrutinise, but subject to Alan's view, I would have thought that there's no harm in circulating the report to members with some sort of explanatory briefing to it.
Thank you, Gary.
Chair, I'll just come in on that then. Yes, I think that's a good suggestion, Paul. I think the larger picture for us is that we'll have a new membership in the council come May, and we're actively planning with the current members task and finish group actually about how we'll communicate these ideas to them and try and keep the new membership on board as this membership has been, because the council's been it's a council initiative. You know, the whole climate emergency came from the council, and the members have been very, very supportive of it throughout. So we'd like to keep that momentum going, and this is one of the tools we can use for that. So thank you for that suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. I'd just like to thank the lead member, Brian, Tony Thomas and Andrew Cutts, and also Alan Smith for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We chuck another thank you into David Wilson from Audit Wales. I was remiss of me, I missed him out in my opening remarks. So thank you, David, and we'll make sure we keep our eye on the ball and get another decent report next time round. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Moving on then to agenda item number 6, update on planning for statement of accounts, pages 69 to 72. I think Julian will be coming with this one. Julian?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'll do a brief introduction to this one. This is a twofold report, really. It's to hopefully give some assurance in terms of an update on our planning to ensure that the statement of accounts. I know it was only, I think, at the last meeting you dealt with the last set of statements of accounts, and we're already talking about next year's statement of accounts. In terms of the process, and to agree that the forward work programme possibly will need to be adjusted in order to take into account the change to the proposed timetable. As I'm sure you're all aware, the last 2 financial years, Welsh Government have granted extensions due to COVID in terms of the timescales for delivering the accounts, and you'll see in section 4 to your report the extended deadline that we worked to over the last 12-month period, and that, as I say, you actually signed off on these the final accounts at the last year in November. As we said in the report when we covered to that one, but I think just need to reinforce it. That delay has had a couple of knock-on impacts. The first being that the timescale didn't allow for misstatements to be corrected within those accounts, so they will be rolled forward to be shown in the next financial year. And secondly, and speaking on Steve and Rhiann's behalf here, because of the extended period that staff had to work on the accounts last year, that did have a significant impact on their ability to be able to work on other areas that they normally would have done during that time scale. In terms of the timetable for doing the 21-22 accounts, we've essentially had to say, and we've been doing this in conjunction with colleagues from Audit Wales, that we're not going to be able to meet the statutory deadlines of the 31st of May and 31st of July, which would have been the intended one for the next year. And we're proposing the timetable, which you'll see on the top of page 73 in your report, which essentially will be that the draft Ddinbych, that's a single entity accounts, so at our own internal accounts, would be completed by the 15th of June. The group accounts, which incorporate Ddinbych Leisure Limited's into our figures, by the 24th of June, and then the draft accounts coming to this committee on the 27th of July, and the final accounts coming in on the 21st of September. Unless the formal legal requirements are again extended by Welsh Government, we would need to issue a formal notice nearer to the time to set out the timetable and explain the reasons for not being able to meet the statutory deadline, which hopefully everything will be okay with regards to that. Again, as I say, this has been worked up in conjunction with colleagues from Audit Wales. And obviously they can speak for themselves if I'm misquoting them, but I think they're at this stage agreeable with what we're proposing. Okay, Steve, if you're able to to connect,
yeah.
Is there anything you want to come in on that, please?
Can you hear me? Sorry for the
Yes, well, Steve.
yeah. So I mean, Julian's covered everything. The only thing I would flag is that, you know, I think that these deadlines, what we're proposing is a sensible approach that is achievable for us. Sorry, can you still hear me? I've just had a unstable network.
I can just about hear you, Steve. Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that the July deadline for Governance and Audit Committee in September actually is a very workable, sensible solution. I have a feeling that actually there's talk around the early closure deadlines actually becoming, you know, dropping out and us returning to the July and September's now. I think the feeling amongst all Section 151 officers in Wales is that we wouldn't want to push this back any further. I mean, I know things happen in any one particular year, and that can't be helped if it has to go back due to, you know, whatever staff shortages in that particular year. But as a norm, we wouldn't want to go, you know, we wouldn't want to move that September date any later because of all the knock-on effects that this has that Julian spoke about. I do know Matthew's got his hand up, and I do know that Audit Wales possibly might have changed their emphasis since we had these discussions, only because it was mentioned at Society of Welsh Treasurers last week. I think I'll leave Matt to speak for Audit Wales now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, Matthew, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, and thanks, Steve and Councillor Thompson-Hill as well. Yeah, just a few observations, really. And as Steve mentioned, I think it's very much a moving picture. As Steve mentioned, we attended the Society of Welsh Treasurers recently, and again, just exploring options, I guess, for this year in terms of taking advantage of the flexibility or the continuing flexibility in Welsh Government's interpretation of the accounts and audit regulations. We heard reference to early closure earlier, where we originally were looking to certify pre-pandemic by the end of July, and I think the appetite for that ambitious agenda is waning now. I think it's also important to recognise the impact and the challenges that was referred to in the paper that Councillor Thompson-Hill referred to. We're still playing catch up now on auditing your grant claims for 2021. You know, pre-pandemic, they'd have been done and dusted by December in a good year. And we're also playing catch up on our accounts planning work to enable us to bring an audit plan to a future committee meeting. So, you know, I'd anticipate this year to be another challenging year. But what I would say is I think we're in a far better place than across the border in England, for example, where as at the end of December, 60% of the 2021 audits were yet to be certified by the auditors, and indeed 58% of the prior year, 1920, still remained outstanding. So whilst it is a challenging position for us and finance teams across Wales, I think we're in a far better position in Wales than across the border. I think, for example, certainly the position in Wales was we'd certified all but one of the 2021 accounts by the end of November, and that one was outstanding because there was ongoing work due to a public inspection report there. I think the only other thing to add, really, as Steve mentioned, the ongoing discussions with Society of Welsh Treasurers. I think there are risks around completing the audit for consideration by the audit committee in September. I think it's only right to flag that to you as a committee today. You know, we're assuming staff remain fit and well and they're available for work. We are currently carrying a number of vacancies. It's not currently a recruiter's market. I don't think we're alone in that, but it is proving difficult to fill those gaps. But we are taking actions to try and bring people in on short-term contracts, for example. And it also assumes no significant issues arising from the accounts and audit regulation, the audit of the draft accounts, sorry. And also, there are no significant changes to CYFLA's code, because I understand CYFLA LASAC, who prepare the code, which is the guidance you're required to follow, are due to go out for consultation on potential changes at this late stage for 2021 as well. What I would say is we'll continue to manage the position with Steve and the team to help mitigate the risks that I've referred to, and we'll keep the team posted on developments from our side as well to hopefully aim to deliver that timetable set out in the paper by the end of September, but it's not without risk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think this is just, you know, an information update really for us as councillors. There's nothing great we can do about this, sadly. Just one question though, if I may, on behalf of community councils, just while we're on the board. I've had 3 community councils in my ward and they're all in the same boat. They're all waiting for their audited accounts to come back. Am I right in saying that that's with Audit Wales now? Because Welsh Government to keep changing the process for auditing local community councils. At one time there was an external body doing them, and then also because we audit twice. We audit locally as community councils, and then we audit through a Welsh Government appointment organisation, which I think am I right in saying, David, it is now Welsh Audit. And I just wondered whether this was the same issue, you know, delays because of COVID, etc., etc.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back, just a couple of points. Yeah, the audit of community councils was outsourced to firms for a number of years, and they've all been brought back in-house during the autumn. The work on those accounts have been taking place during the autumn months. And again, we're playing catch up, I think, covering a number of years in some cases. In terms of the specific community councils, I'm not cited what the position is on those. But as far as I'm aware, good progress has been made in playing catch up and getting to conclude that work imminently. So hopefully you'll see some progress there. But again, Councillor Holland, if you have any concerns about any specific community councils, I'd be happy to take those on board as well and come back to you on those.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so intend to move on. If I go to the recommendations are at 3.1. To note the update on planning to ensure the time of completion of the statement of accounts for 2021 to 2022. And on 3.2, to agree to amend the committee's forward work programme to consider the draft statement of accounts at the meeting on the 27th of July and to receive the final statement of accounts and Audit Wales audit reports at the meeting on the 21st of September. You okay with that, members? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. All in favour. Moving on then to agenda item number 7, which is on pages 73 to 106, which is the Treasury Manager Report to receive a report showing how the Council will manage its investments and its borrowing for the coming year and sets the policies within which the Treasury Management function operates. Julian?
Yes, yeah, I'll again, if I may, Chair, introduce this. And this is one paper where I definitely hope Steve's internet will hold together long enough to answer any of the questions that come as a result of this, but I'm quite happy to introduce it. Again, you're probably used now to the format of this report. I know you all avidly look forward to reports on Treasury management. So the two elements being the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, which is Appendix 1 in your pack, which has a couple of annexes attached to it as well, and then an in-year update, which is contained within Appendix 2 to the report. As you well know by now, at any given time we have roughly £20 million of cash available, so we need to make sure at all times the three key planks to our treasury management are contained within sections 4.2 in the covering report, and those are as security, liquidity, and only after all that's concerned. I don't know quite why we actually include yield these days, because the rates are so low that we actually can achieve. So if we turn to the strategy statement in Appendix 1, that I'm not going to go through it obviously in great detail, but you will know there that the capital prudential indicators have now been stripped out of this particular report and put into the capital strategy report, which will be going into council next month. The actual statement itself goes through some background, some national, international background to what impacts upon treasury management, lists of counterparties that we can and can't work with, limits on investments for different types of investment partner, the borrowing strategy, which will touch upon slightly when we come to the Appendix 2. I mean, historically, we've tended to use the PWLB, the Public Works Loans Board. Of late, we've been borrowing more from other local authorities. You'll see within there the MRP statement, which is one that we need to formally agree on an annual basis at council, and that's obviously that will be being taken as part of the report to council. Annex A to the report details the prudential indicators, those haven't been stripped out and put in the capital strategy report itself. I'm pleased to confirm that at all times we stayed within all of the limits which are set annually by council. Appendix C, because this is an area where you can have a conversation just with abbreviations and letters. There's a handy glossary there, so if you're not sure what any of the terms refer to. Appendix 2 is the in-year update. Just a couple of points to highlight before I hand over to Steve. You'll see in there under the borrowing strategy that we have 6 loans from other authorities totaling around about £30 million, which will be maturing in the next 12 months. As you can see there, 5 million next month, 3 million in May, the bulk in October, and another 7 million in November. And when those have been completed, we will then review the position before either renewing those or taking some other course of action. As I said, historically, we had borrowed almost exclusively from the Public Works Loans Board, but we haven't actually taken any out with them since the pandemic began. One of the pointers wanted to highlight out of that, seeing as we are at governance and audit, is the last audit, internal audit review, which was up to January 21. I'm pleased to note that there was medium assurance with only a couple of issues highlighted. And the final point that I'd like to draw out of this is, I know we've referred to this in a number of other different fora over the last 6 to 8 months or so, as has Steve, in terms of our development of a medium-term capital strategy, which we are currently developing. It's there ideally to do a bit of horizon scanning to see what sort of requirement potentially there is for capital funding going forward over the next 5 to 10 years, and ballpark the list from services would be around about £180 million. So even allowing for the fact that that doesn't take into account any external grant funding we were able to draw down, clearly that's probably going to be outside of our remit to be able to deliver. So it will be a question of certainly phasing those projects potentially over a longer period, and they would need to go through all of our normal internal processes before they were included within the capital plan. But it's to give us some sort of idea of the scope and scale that might well be required over the current period, so that Steve and the team are able to make some sort of planning accordingly. I think those are all the points I wanted to make. Hopefully Steve is available now to pick up anything that I've missed out of there. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Steve.
So I did have a long list, and as usual, I've been ticking them off as Julian's covered the points. So I've only got about 3 points left to raise, really. I was just going to point out on page 85 the 2 graphs, and I think what it's quite illustrative, really, as you'd imagine a graph to be. It's the story of COVID, really. You can see that both investment balances and borrowing balances peaked at the end of 1920 financial year, and then through the first months of 2021. And this was, if you remember, where we were really worried about cash flow, and we actually took out some borrowing in March 2020, and then Welsh Government actually started to pay us our revenue support grant. They front loaded those payments. And what that meant is that actually we held a lot of cash. So both our borrowing increased at that point, but it also meant we had cash while we waited for the impact of COVID. and that increased our balances, and you can see the balances for about 4 or 5 months look quite high, and that's artificially high. It's now gone back down to the normal sort of pattern, and you can see that throughout this financial year that the patterns have returned to a bit more normality. So I just wanted to flag that really, that blip was specifically around that COVID position. And then just very briefly, just 2 other points. On page 91, just flagging the member training. We are aware that there's an election, and we will be doing, I'll be raising it this afternoon actually with our Arlene Close Treasury Management consultants, and we'll be arranging something after post-elections, probably again like we did last time, for everyone, invited for everyone, but obviously members of this committee in particular will be interested and be encouraged to attend, and then obviously we can take it from there if anything further is required. So I think that's important. And then the only other 2 things to point out is obviously we are still in a very uncertain economic outlook. You know, need to read the press every day, and all sorts of things happening that we wouldn't have predicted 12 months ago, even in world events. So it is still very uncertain, but interestingly, the Arlene Close are still forward projecting steady interest rates. So, you know, nothing surprising or unusual happening with those interest rates, according to our Treasury Management consultants, obviously. That can change, but so just that, you know, although the economy is looking uncertain, no one's predicting any massive change in those interest rates in the short term anyway. So just to flag those things up. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Julian. Martin, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as Steve says, it's a worrying world that we live in at the moment, and one of the things you can't predict, and budget for is what Mr. Putin may be doing next, and that impact on the rest of the world and the world economy. Just a couple of quick questions. Obviously, as you said, during the COVID period, we as a council were actually supporting Welsh Government's grant schemes and things like that. And I know we were funding quite a bit of that for a while until Welsh government money came through. So I'm assuming that's part of those blips on your graphs. And then really 3.1, this business of our borrowing strategy. If I remember rightly from previous conversations with you, you had said that we took out some of these sort of very short-term loans from using other local authorities' cash reserves because they were cheap, and it helped us with our cash flow during that time. So really, is this really borrowing, or is it just, supporting our cash flow? That's the question. And obviously, if it's borrowing, then we've got quite a bit of borrowing to repay, haven't we, in the next few months? Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Do you want to come back, Julian or Steve?
If Steve's available, I'm batting that one in his direction.
Yeah. Just please raise your hand if I would go off. But yes, to your first question, that is all to do with those blips. They announced I think it was the £39 million grants to businesses, and we had to fund some of that at the beginning. And whilst that isn't a criticism of Welsh Government, because they did turn around their approach to RSG, and they did everything they could to help local authorities get that money out to businesses as quickly as possible, to be fair. But there was a period of about, that 4-week period where we were really concerned about cash flow. But, we did work together with Welsh Government on that. As far as your second point, I think that we do temporary borrowing, but it is right to class it as borrowing, because when that borrowing is up, it's not that we don't need that borrowing anymore. It means that we have to refinance that borrowing. So we either, and this is around the question of when we lock in long-term loans and the timing of that, and we work closely with Arlene Close to decide actually what's cheaper. Is it cheaper to borrow in the short term over the 6 to 12 months, or is it now time to lock in that borrowing over 10, 15, 20 years. So that's our constant conversation with Arlene Close, really, is to when to lock in that borrowing. But I think it's not short-term borrowing as in to fund the blip. It's us managing our treasury, our treasury management, which is increasing. We're investing more in our assets. Our borrowing will increase over the years. I mean, so on the other hand, borrowing does drop off the other end as well. So we're just constantly managing it, and we work, as I say, closely with Arlene Close. But I think it's fair to say that it should be included in the borrowing figure.
Mr. Chairman, could you just come back? Obviously, thanks for that. Because I think I remember at some stage you were saying that, because interest rates were so low, it was useful to perhaps take some of this cash from these other authorities, even though we didn't necessarily needed to use it at the time, if I recall rightly, when I've asked that question before. And often you look at these sort of things really as a temporary overdraft rather than a borrowing. But thank you very much for clarifying that, Steve.
Thank you, Martin. Rhys, you want to come forward?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think Steve knows of my fondness for graphs and bar charts, so he's answered my first question. I'm looking here at Appendix 2, and I'm just interested on 1.1. It says the economic outlook remains uncertain following the impact of coronavirus. Martin's just added Putin to that list. I was interested whether EU exit should be on that as well, just for the sake of consistency, because when we look at item 9, annual governance statement, it there states uncertainty over funding due to EU exit. So it's not a political point, but just from the view of consistency, I was just wondering whether it affected one more than the other. That's question 1. My next question, if I can find it, 3.3, the council is likely to have a significant borrowing requirement in the future. Is that because of the reduction in carbon dioxide strategy that we talked about earlier with the prudential borrowing? I'm sorry, I'm showing my ignorance here. I'm quite looking forward to the training that this group will receive. If we go to the audit review on point 5.4, it says that a medium assurance rating was awarded with 3 recommendations made to review the risk registers, documentation and recording. All these are currently being implemented, so I presume that we will hear back how those have been implemented at a future meeting. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Steve, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I can come back. I think I would agree with Brexit. It is a an uncertain an impact on the economy. We don't know what that impact will be yet, I think, is the honest approach there. So I think you're right, it is a risk, and it probably should have been in there. So things like Putin, I think with the best will in the world, it's hard to predict things like that, and that's blown up over the last 12 months that and could have a massive impact. I think
that's not an appropriate phraseology, Steve.
No, that's true. Sorry about
that. That was quite unfortunate. We don't talk about blowing up and Putin. Okay.
That's probably why I didn't put Brexit in the paper either, just in case I meant for part. But you're right, it is a risk. I mean, there's lots of others, but yes, you're right, it is. As far as the significant borrowing requirement, the true answer is yes, but not only the carbon commitment. It's the commitment for highways spend. It's the commitment for 21st century schools spend. It's all our capital plan and all our the horizon scanning that we think we want to do. Now, some of these are schemes that are choices, but some of them aren't. Some of them are, so for example, the investment in highways, if we didn't do that, our highways would just get worse and worse and worse, and we would have to spend even more on them in 5 years' time, for instance. So and there's a balance there, and that's part of the medium-term capital strategy that we'll need to go through that. Audit review, they are quite minor. They're things like making sure that certain parts of the asset register are checked by another person. We can report back to the committee separately if you want in a update what those were and what our response is, but audit are happy with our response and we're just implementing what they found. So
okay, thank you, Steve. As you're coming through loud and clear, can I go and ask one more brief question that I missed out the first time around? 3.1, it talks about 6 temporary loans from other local authorities. I'm just interested to know, are there local authorities with money to loan? Do we loan to other local authorities? Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we don't have any money to loan to other authorities. Most of these authorities are big English authorities, and sort of authorities that have been in existence for a number of years, and some of them do have big reserves and they want to invest them, and they want their own returns, and loaning to another local authority not only gets them a return but also is probably the safest place to borrow, so that there is a live market in inter-authority loans, and it's obviously beneficial to both parties. It's very safe. It's safe for us because we're borrowing off another local authority. They're one of the most risk-free sort of places that you can borrow from. Interest rates are low. As I say, yeah, risk and the cost of it means that they're very attractive when we're looking at these temporary loans.
Okay,
we're not one of them. I don't think we've ever borrowed from another Welsh authority, I'll be honest. I think it is all English authorities.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rhys. Lisa, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the point about the internal audit reviews, and we are following up those recommendations as part of our current review of financial services. So we will feed back to committee as part of our internal audit update reports, and all members get a copy of our reports as well. So you should get an update on that.
Thank you, Lisa. Ellie, you wanted to come in?
Yeah. Reading the report yesterday afternoon at the full council, I noted that the county banks with the NatWest, and of course I suddenly realised there's no banks in Prestatyn, so I'm concerned about all the other areas in Denbighshire. How are we coping with the loss of banks in the county for officers or cashiers to bank the money? I know most people should be paying by card, but there are still people that go to the post office and draw their pensions and they want to pay their rates, etc. So I'm just wondering, Julian, Steve, how are we coping with that? Okay.
Question for you, Julian.
Yeah.
I suppose the quick answer is in terms of the availability of to be able to bank cash. Apart from a few areas of our operation, we don't really operate on that. So the absence of a bank branch physically available to us probably doesn't impact us in much as it would on many others, because everything's done electronically for all the work that we do. There are some areas still, obviously, in terms of, I don't know, any banking takings from car parking. That's one historically where there's been significant elements of cash handling. That's dropped off, of course, because we've been moving to more and more payments by card. We were moving to that before COVID, and of course that's accelerated it when nobody was really using cash. So I think that's probably Steve, would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think because obviously our offices, we've worked with it and it's fine. There's no detrimental impact on our services. There was some concern around when we were issuing checks to individuals, because what they sometimes wanted them to cash their checks. There are so few checks that are actually done now. I mean, really, a handful, really very few. Most, everyone has a bank account. Lots of benefits. You have to have a bank account. So, yeah, we do very, very few checks now, so I don't think there's much of an impact on the residents either. Really, the cash offices are still all open, and yeah, that was the only impact that we saw when certainly the NatWest closed. Was that I think RHEOLI'R is the only.
I think Will's the only one in the area, isn't it?
Yeah. We're still very lucky. We've got banks in RHEOLI'R, but as I say, I was concerned because there are, I mean, I know people that go to the library to pay their bits and bobs in RHEOLI'R. But then I suddenly thought, oh, heck, what about Prestatyn? Because that hasn't got any banks. But thank you for that, because I was just concerned about the residents plus the staff dealing with it. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from members before I bring a member outside the committee in? No. Mary?
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd, unwaith eto. Atodiad 2, tudalen 102, adran 4, 4.1 ydy'r adran. A ni'n falch i weld y datganiad yma. In particular, we had to confirm that we were not planning to purchase investment assets primarily for yield. Dwi'n meddwl bod fi wedi darllen yn y papurau Llywodraeth leol bod yna ambell i gyngor yn Lloegr wedi mynd i drafferth mawr hefo'r math yma o fuddsoddi ac bron iawn di torri fyny. Dwi'n meddwl bod fi'n iawn a bod Steve yn medru ngoleuo fi mwy. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, can you come back, Steve, to Mary?
Yes, certainly. Yes, you're right, and that's rule because they were concerned about local authorities overstretching themselves, and you know, it's opening themselves up to risk, isn't it? And that is the key worry, I think, for the UK government. It doesn't impact us. We've never done this. I don't think there's anything on the horizon scanning that would involve us doing this. The closest we probably come to is sort of regeneration projects, but we're doing it for the regeneration. We're not doing it because they're commercial. We're not looking for a yield. We're looking for regeneration. That would be the only commercially type thing we've got involved in the past. But we're not looking for yield. We're doing it for regeneration purposes. So that would be allowed. That's okay to do it for that purpose.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Mary. Okay, members, moving on to the recommendations. 3.1, that the committee reviews the TMSS for 2022 and 23 and the prudential indicators for 2022, 2023, 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025. All members happy with that? So, thank you. Moving on, members, to agenda item number 8, which is the internal audit follow-up project management of the Queen's Building.
Mr Cadeirydd, ydy Gary wedi sylwi na ddylech chi'm trafod ddim gofyn am bleidlais ar 3.2 a 3.3. Ddylech chi orffen ar 3.1 os dwi wedi dall yn iawn. Wrach bod fi'n anghywir.
Chair, yeah, I think Councillor Mary Claude Davis is correct. So I took it that you were just moving the recommendations on block. But if you wanted to move and second the recommendations on block, then that would be perfectly appropriate.
Members, you want to move the recommendation
on block? I move.
Do I have a seconder? Ellie Chard, thank you. Okay, thank you, Merrick, for that. Moving on then to agenda item number 8. As I say, pages 107 to 118, to receive an update report on the progress in implementing the action plan that accompanied the internal audit report on the project management of the Queen's Building which was presented to the committee in January 2021. If I can just get the page. Is this you again, Julian, coming in with this? Or Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, like you said, this is an update on progress with implementing the action plan that arose from our original audit of the project management of the Queen's Building project. This is our second follow-up review. The original audit was given a low assurance, which is why the committee requested further updates on progress. So this is our second progress report. Our first progress report dated January 20, let me find myself in these papers. Our first follow-up identified the progress had been made and 8 out of the 12 actions had been fully implemented. And so we increased the assurance rating to medium assurance based on the progress with implementing the action plan. Just want to make the point that we haven't gone back and reviewed the project because, you know, it is a moving thing. We just look solely at the implementation of the action plan from that original audit. So we carried out a second follow-up to establish progress with the remaining 4 actions. And I apologise, I've noticed that we've attached the first follow-up to your papers. So I have circulated the second follow-up papers, which aren't drastically different. It's still 4 actions remaining. And so if you have those that I've circulated, I'll just go through that. The audit opinion just reflects the fact that whilst there have been progress, there have been delays, and that's mainly due to the reconfiguration of the project management system. The original project management system was due to end its contract, so that had to go to be out to tender. The council has stuck with the same system, but there's quite a few upgrades required to get the functionality that's required from that system, and that has impacted on 3 of the actions. I just wanted to make it clear as well that these actions are general project management actions, because we always look at the root cause of what's creating some of the issues affecting projects. So these aren't specific to Queen's Building, these are general issues. And so that covers 1.2 in the action plan. Shows basically that a delay with reconfiguring the project management system, but the corporate executive team is keeping a watchful eye on progress with the project. Number 1.3 in the action plan, a review of the roles and responsibilities has progressed in terms of what the role of the stage review group is. And these are meant to do the checks over the business case and things like that to make sure that projections and forecasts, things like that, are robust. Whilst that work has taken place, they're just waiting on the project management system before implementing it. So that should be completed by the end of June 2022. Similarly, 1.4 Verto access levels, whilst there have been updates to the reporting from the Verto project management system, they were due to review the user access at the time of our follow-up. So that should be taking place this month. And then the ICT department, who are now responsible for maintaining the Verto system, they'll be reviewing it on a periodic basis to make sure user access are accurate. And then finally, number 4.1, there's been a vacancy with the program manager post over the RHEOL regeneration program, which has impacted on this action. So it's focusing on developing a mechanism so that project benefits from the Queen's project can feed into the overarching RHEOL regeneration program. And that's just once the project's completed, it's ensuring that the benefits can still be monitored as part of that program. I know that Mark Dixon is here as well. So if there's any questions, I just wanted to point out that Mark might not know the progress in terms of the general project management system aspects, because that's managed by a different team, but I'm sure between us we'll be able to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Martin, you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we all know, as a committee, we were, very concerned about this particular project in its early days. And to me, there are two parts to this cake. One of which is the actual project management, and Lisa is looking at that side of things and making sure that that we're following the correct procedures and projects. Just a couple of quick questions, if I may, on that. The 2.1, obviously we know that the actual forecasted costs were exceeded for that year, but in 2.2 we then talk about Welsh Government having approved the capital plan. Can I just ask, are they picking up some of these excesses in this? Because we know that part of the problem with this project was that the building is Victorian, and things were being found after the event, which increased the costs of the actual redevelopment of this site. So can I ask, what has Welsh Government picked up there when it went before their capital panel and approved it, just as a matter of interest there? The Verto project management system, am I right in saying that we are still looking, are we looking at changing that because we think it's not the best system going? And just wonder where we were with that. And if we are thinking of changing it, what do other councils use for their project management systems? And then the final point really, which is the other side of the coin, I just want some sort of reassurance really, because what we've seen certainly in RHEOL is that a lot of these buildings are very old, they're Victorian, perhaps haven't been in some cases built in the best way possible originally, and then because of their age they've created more problems over the years for the owners of those buildings, whoever those owners were. And we know in this particular case, for example, the insides of the building were sprayed with asbestos, and in some ways that hid other issues. Can I just ask for reassurance now that when we're looking at this type of building, especially Victorian buildings, wherever they are in the county, but there seem to be a lot of them in RHEOL, that we're taking extra steps initially before we acquire the buildings to make sure that we're not buying a problem? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Mark, you had your hand up.
Well, Julian's got his hand up if he's
Okay,
if he wants to go first.
You want to come in?
No, it's okay. If Mark, if you want to go first.
Okay. Right.
So sorry. The one thing I would say, just to point out, to be fair to Mark, just in case you're asking any detailed questions, Mark has only just assumed project management responsibilities for this project just before Christmas, following Tom Booty's leaving of the authority. So I ask you to be sensitive to that. But so if Mark wants to come in, and I just might need to make a couple of comments afterwards.
Yeah. So the first point was around the role of the Welsh Government in funding the additional costs. Yes, they have provided additional funds for the costs incurred to date. The Welsh Government is represented on the project board, so they have a handle on exactly what's happening and what the likely outturns will be and so on. So yes, they have been supportive in that regard. The second point, perhaps I'll leave to Lisa, because it was about project management in other authorities, about when we looked at the possible acquisition of buildings in RHEOL and their condition. What we do now is undertake a structural survey. So it's rather than just a survey in terms of the value of a property and on the open market, it is more intrusive to understand their condition. Having said that, of course, as you quite rightly point out, a lot of these properties were poorly built in the first place. And if we do want as a priority to address them in terms of their condition or role in the regeneration of the town, then clearly there will nevertheless be an underlying requirement to purchase them, but in the full knowledge of what the structural condition is.
Thank you, Mark. Julian, do you want to come in? Oh, Lisa. Lisa's got her hand up.
Yes, if I can just add to what Mark said and to support it. First of all, in terms of Welsh Government's input, as Mark says, they play a full part within the project board, and they are very supportive of the scheme and want it to be successful for all the reasons that we all do. So they have supported us and continue to support us financially wherever they can within their own restrictions. Just in terms of what we do with buildings before we purchase them, I think it's only fair to say that there is only so far that we can actually go prior to purchasing a building in terms of what we can survey. In terms of asbestos, because you're right, one of the biggest issues that have been on this particular project is in terms of the amount, the scale, and the location of asbestos, which we had no knowledge of. In fact, the previous owners had no knowledge of. The surveys that we carry out pre-purchase are the same as anybody else would carry out, are non-intrusive surveys. I'm sure a prospective vendor of a property aren't going to be too particularly happy if we suddenly start knocking down walls to see what's underneath, and then deciding we're not going to purchase it on the strength of that. I think we just need to be realistic that in some cases we are not going to be able to pick up the full extent of things from the pre-purchase surveys, simply because you can't do that degree of work in advance of a purchase, and that would be market norm.
Thank you, Julian. Lisa?
Yeah, just coming back on the question around the Verto project management system. The tender is actually completed, and they have gone back with the system that we were with originally, so Verto. So we are with the same system. It's just there's an agreement that there will be some enhancements to that system, which they're coordinating with the supplier. I'm aware there are a number of other councils that use Verto, but I can't say what systems other councils use, but I know there are a number do use Verto as a system.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, Martin.
Can I just come back? Thank you very much for those responses, thank you very much to Mark for stepping into the breach there as well. Just on a final point, obviously as councillors and as a council, we have to make sure we get best value for money in relation to taxpayers' funding. It's good to know that the Welsh Government have supported this because obviously it's they're backing this project as well, so that we're not looking at a large problem financially for us. But having said all that, at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money wherever it comes from. So it's good to know that we are not ending up with a big debt here. But we would want to monitor this, I think, until it's completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Paul?
Oh, thank you, Chair. This is really a comment for Martin and Mark initially. Generally, I was brought up on when I was in work in local authorities myself, that you only knew what was in buildings when they were totally demolished. In other words, there was always a risk, and you had to manage that risk. And maybe part of it was putting in a contingency sum or having some degree of some big caveats, if you like, when you did decide to take actions. But it might sound a bit twee, but actually I think it's very true. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I think there was a contingency put in here, but because of the size of the sites and the amount of asbestos that was found, I think the contingency was used, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the simple point is, yes, there's always a contingency figure built into any of our capital schemes. However, in this particular set of circumstances, it was just almost like a perfect storm of things that if things could materialize, they did materialize. And it just basically went far beyond what any normal contingency would be able to accommodate.
Thanks, Julian. Rhys?
Thank you, Chair. Some of us were present at a very long full council yesterday, and I'm sure that I heard a lead member at that point saying that this project would be delivered on time and on budget. I haven't been back to listen to the recording, but that leads me to ask a few questions actually about, well, let's look at 2.1 in the internal audit here. A major risk was identified. Actual and forecasted project costs far exceed estimate. Actual cost, that's actual spending, I presume. Actual and forecast project costs far exceed estimates. And when I go over to the right-hand side, that matter, it says, is closed and duplicated with actions 1.2 and 1.3. So could I just have an explanation of how something can be a major risk and it can be closed, and then it's referred to 1.1 and 1.3, which are moderate risks? And what actions have been taken to get rid of that major risk and make them moderate and include them in two other things? Just in simple layman's language, can you just explain to me how that has happened, please? Thank you, Chair.
If I just go back to
Chair, yeah.
If I just go back to yesterday's meeting, I think the lead member was talking about the project of the new East Rill Sea Defence that has...
Yes, I wondered if that is the one that he was talking about, and also the one that is gaining all the publicity at the moment. So, but still, my question is about the major risk there that was identified and has now somehow been subsumed into 1.2 and 1.3. I'm not looking for any fault in this, but just an explanation in layman's terms how that risk has been mitigated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Steve, did you want to come in on this one?
Actually, Chair, I was just going to point out what you had said about the lead member. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the comment I made was that, which is quite correct, Chair, is that the report will be coming to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time in relation to this project. That's what I referred to in relation to this. Yes, as you say, and another lead member referred to another totally independent project. Yeah. So
there's too many projects. That's what it is. Too many projects.
That's the nature. That's the nature of local government, Rhys.
Yeah. Thank you for the explanation. No problem.
Yeah. So I'll hand over to Lisa for the technical answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, with regards to 2.1, 2.2, the reason why they're closed, the issue that we've raised, the actions proposed have been almost like to improve the controls in place and the governance arrangements, because, you know, the project is where it is. You know, we can't almost change that aspect, but what we can look at is making sure that if there's any other changes, that they are escalated to the appropriate place, and that any business case that was originally developed is robustly challenged and tested by a stage review group, and that any changes are reflected in the revised business case, and that is reported to the right forum for a decision whether to proceed or not. So those are the actions and why those aspects have been closed, and why we will continue to monitor that these stage review groups and things like that are put in place and are robust for future projects as well as existing ones.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I just come back to 1.3? It says in the final column, in progress, revised date. This action is on hold until the decision is made on the future platform. Can you just explain what that means to me, please? Future platform.
Sorry, I just muted myself and I was already anyway.
I think that's Verto.
That's Verto, yes.
Okay.
That's the Verto system. Yeah.
And the decision has been taken to stay with that.
Okay, so just going back to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhys. Martin, is that an old hand?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, that the comment about the lead members' comments yesterday, I think we've got to be very careful. We don't put words into other people's mouths. Actually, I think there was an assumption made in the council yesterday that actually a lot of our projects were like this. In reality, they're not. The lead member was actually giving examples of at least two. He also mentioned Llangollen, where things were on target and things were being met. So I think we've got to be careful we don't put words into people's mouths. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Members, can you take your hand down, Martin? Any more speakers before I put it out to outside the committee? No. Mary?
Diolch yn fawr eto, Mr Cadeirydd. 4.1, colli un o'r arolygwyr cynllunio, dwi'n meddwl i Lisa dynnu sylw at hwn, oedd hyn oherwydd toriadau yn yr adran gyda ni, neu oedd o rhywbeth tu allan i'n ni, felly, ddari achosio. Hefyd, edrych ar tudalen 1, 2, 3 ydi o, 4.4, be ydy'r ferto yma? Cwmni di o, neu ffordd o weithio, neu be? Mae'n neis cael enw, ond mae'n neis gwybod be maen nhw'n wneud hefyd. Ac yda ni'n siŵr na fyddwn yn yr un picil yn y dyfodol ar waith arall sydd gan y cyngor. Mae o'n dipyn o adroddiad, ac dwi'n diolch i chi, Lisa, am waith cywrain iawn, dweud y gwir. Ond mae hwn yn drist i feddwl bod ni fel cyngor wrthi ers 5 mlynedd ar 20, a bod ni mewn sefyllfa fel hyn gyda chontract felly. Archwilio adeiladau yn ein prynu, wrth archwilio adeiladau ydyn ni'n ei prynu, gellir bod yn siŵr bydd asbestos ym mhob adeilad cyn i'r ddeddf asbestos ddod i fod. Mae hwnna'n ffaith, achos o'n i'n gweithio efo fo pan o'n i'n sair coed ac yn adeiladu pethau. Felly, da ni yn gwybod fydd yna asbestos yn yr adeiladau yma. Ac fel ofynwyd cynt, dwi'n yn teimlo bod ni wedi rhoi digon o bres wrth gefn. Fel dwedwyd gan y cadeirydd, mae'n hen adeilad Fictoraidd, a mae'n waith wedi wneud blynyddoedd ar ôl hynny. Mae eisiau bod dipyn mwy gofalus. A tybed, allwn ni ddefnyddio beth sydd wedi digwydd yn yr adeilad yma i'r dyfodol. Bod ni yn gwneud yn siŵr bod yna ddigon o bres wrth gefn i fynd i gael yr asbestos ono, felly heb achosi gormod o gostau da ni heb ddarganfod felly. A wedyn 1.3 tudalen 4 eto, 120. Diolch i chi am yr ymateb o fanna. O'n i'n methu dad be oedd y platfform yma. O'n i'n mewn gorsaf dren oedden ni. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Mary. Lisa, do you want to explain Verto?
Do you want me to do that, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Julian.
Verto is the software program. Verto is the name of the company. We always refer, like Proactis and various other things, we always refer to the company by and large rather than what it does. Verto is the software program that we use to do project management in the authority. I mean, they do other things, and it's a question of which they all have different modules you can bolt onto them to do different things. So I think that's what's being tweaked in the new contract. I wouldn't claim to be a world expert on what it does, but that's what it actually is, and it's a software platform. That's why that's what the technical term for it is.
Mae hwnna'n ateb y cwestiwn yn dda iawn, Julian. Diolch yn fawr.
Good. Managed to get myself through that one then. Sorry. In terms of, I suppose, in terms of a question of what level of contingency you build into a project, as I said, we will always build some level of contingency into capital schemes, based on the best estimates that you can do. You've also got to bear in mind that in a lot of cases when we're going for external funding, external funders won't fund for contingencies. So you can't just sort of inflate the cost of a project by putting in a huge catch-all thing just in case something might happen, because the end result of that is there probably would be no project. So it's always a balancing act in terms of that. And I don't want to go into the specifics of the particular detail of the technical project that we've been through on this one, but in terms of the asbestos, it has really been, I referred to it earlier as a perfect storm. Literally virtually to the last week, we were uncovering previously hitherto unknown boiler rooms after everything had been demolished, which weren't on plans, which weren't on anything else to do with anything, which were jam full of asbestos lagging and God knows what else. And obviously you have no choice but to deal with those sorts of circumstances. And that was not a one-off either in this project. And those are the sort of things that would never come up in any sort of survey that came up. And it's just unfortunate that it all happened on one project.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I think I've been took through the building on many occasions, and although this was a massive building, there were like 6 different buildings within, different nightclubs, these penny slot machine places, and walls had been built and other walls knocked down, so you couldn't just get all around the place. So once I got took through, I did have an understanding of it. Steve, you want to come in?
Just on 2 points, Chair, if I may, please. Just on Verto, I think it's probably important to point out that a full tender was done for Verto and a new spec created. It just so happened the same company won that tender exercise. Although it is the same system, inverted commas, the new version of the system is far more user-friendly. You can change it for how you want to work locally, etc. So that's I just want you to think that we've just gone with the old system. That isn't the case. It's a new version of their system, which went through a rigorous tender exercise and was the best. The people who judged that, it was judged as the best one available. So just to clarify that, just on the contingency and funding, it should be remembered that we approve a capital plan, and we also look at contingency for that capital plan as an overall plan. Some of those projects within will be fairly straightforward and are minimal risk for overspend. So you could say the highways investment is a bit like that, because we can always stop. We can stop when we spent our 4 million in that year and just wait till next year and start spending again. Each little component can be done individually, and there's very little risk of overspend on that unless we choose to invest more in that area, obviously. With some, a big complicated project that is, this is more complicated than a new build, as we've all been saying, this would have been a high risk project. Now, the mix each year is looked at, and we include a contingency for not only for each individual project, but also for the delivery of the corporate plan. Some of that, contingency, so in some years isn't required and can be released in year to fund new projects that come about in year, but in some years it is actually needed, and sometimes more. So yeah, just to explain that we manage a capital plan as a whole, as well as each individual project managers on each individual project. So just to explain a bit about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Mary.
Alla'r Lisa ddod yn ôl ar be hi yn alw'n project manager ar dan 4.1 dwi'n meddwl oedd o. So chi jyst medru, da chi sôn am hwnna, ond nes i'n dal be o'ch chi'n methu da bod o'n brin o'n i na dona'r un yno. Diolch yn fawr.
Ie, i mi ddall ers i Mike Horrocks adael fel y programme manager, mi oedd Nicola Cai yn edrych ar ôl y prosiect am gyfnod, ond dwi'n deall bod y rôl yna wedi cael ei lenwi eto. Dyna be o'n i'n...
Na, diolch am hwnna. Dyna be oedd ymwneud i fi bod ni ddim wedi llenwi'r swydd wag sydd wedi achosi problem nes ymlaen felly, tybed. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mary. Bobby, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just an interested observer because, as you have all pointed out, this is has been quite a troublesome contract, and probably the costs have doubled. I just wondered if I could ask Lisa, when you do a sort of deep dive audit, do you take into account, or are you able to audit the contractors that have been involved as well as the council, or is it just the council side?
Depending on what's written into the contract, if it's using the standard council template, there should be a provision in there to enable internal audit to access information that it requires. It depends on what the review and what we find, but we tend to focus on the contract management side and look at the council's arrangements. But if there was specific concerns, we can look into the contractors. An example of that is, we audit Civica, Revs and Bens. That's a contract that the council has, and more recently with Ddinbych Leisure, we can audit as part of the contract there. We've got a right of access.
Well, I suppose what I'm really asking, Lisa, is have you done any sort of audit into the contractors that have been used in the case of the Queen's Market?
At the time of the original audit in January 2021, it hadn't yet reached the point of appointing a contractor. So since then, we have done a follow-up of that action plan. I am pulling together the audit plan for 22-23 now. So we always include a provision for project management as part of that. And it could well be likely that Queen's is the one showing the highest risk that requires an audit, and that's something that can be picked up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bobby. Okay, members, we're all done. Just before moving on to the recommendations, I've got one question. I don't know if Gary could answer this one. The project board that was set up, we were asked for a member from the RHEOL members area group to sit on that board. Is the project board always in part 2, or can that member report back to the RHEOL member area group?
Well, this is just I think this is a generic point, if you like. So the position in respect of internal bodies that we create to oversee things is that they are private meetings within the council. We're not required by law to publish agendas, papers, minutes, as we are for our formal committees, such as this one. That doesn't mean, however, that all of the information that board receives is always confidential. There's a difference between private and confidential. And it would depend on the nature of the information that was being reported back. So that is the general rule. It's the nature and quality of the information that's being reported, not the status of the actual board. So that member would have to check with the board whether or not the information that they wanted to impart was appropriate, because it is a breach of the code of conduct for any member to disclose information which has the necessary quality of confidence. But it's also a breach of the code of conduct not to prevent access to information to which somebody would otherwise be lawfully entitled. So this is a really mealy-mouthed lawyer's answer. I'm realizing as I say it, but in standard legal terms, it depends, basically. So it depends on the nature of the information that they want to report back.
Thanks very much, Gary. Okay then, members. Moving on to the recommendation that the committee reviews the progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. I think Lisa said you're putting a report together next year, this year I should say.
Yeah, the next follow-up is due for July 2022, but like I said to Councillor Bobby Feely just then, it could well be that this project's something that deserves a second look at, given that time's moved on, and then the follow-up actions can be picked up as part of that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Chair, just a thought. As Lisa has said, that there's general learning lessons out of this particular project and this particular audit. There's corporate implications like we've had on contracts and exceptions. On that basis, should it come back to this committee? Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think that is supposed to be coming back to this committee, is it, Lisa?
Yeah, the decision really is, if you want it to come back, it can come back as part of the internal audit update reports, just on the 4 actions that are outstanding. Or if you want a separate agenda item. So it's a bit more focused, it's up to you.
What would you like, members, to come back as I'm in your hands.
Possibly an agenda item. This is the only one project I know of that we've had real concerns about so far. May have been others historically before my time, but I think it would be good to put this back on the agenda just for an update. Thank you.
Okay.
And for the wider implications for other projects.
Yeah.
Okay, members. So the recommendation that the committee reviews progress with addressing the audit actions, decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. Can I have a proposer? Martin, seconder. Paul, thank you. Moving on then, we're almost at the end, members. Agenda item number 9, which is the annual governance statement improvement update. To receive an update report on progress made in implementing the improvement plan contained within the annual governance statement. Copies attached. Is this Lisa?
Want me to go through that? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this is an update on the improvement plan on the annual governance statement 2021 that came to you in July 2021. It's good practice to have an update and to oversee progress with implementing the improvement actions that have been identified. Just to mention, this is always a collective piece. It's the corporate governance working group pulls together the action plan, the annual governance statement, and also the progress on it. I just coordinate it. So the appendix to the report has just got the action plan there and the progress update as at January 2022. I won't go through it all, but just to point out the Officers' Code of Conduct, whilst there have been some guidance and training to staff and members on declaration of interest and gifts and hospitality, a review of the Code of Conduct and gifts and hospitality and declaration of interest policy and procedures is underway, and I think with pre-election period, it's unlikely to be completed by the end of March, although the documentation should be produced. It won't have had the approval by that date, so there might be some slippage. The budgetary pressures, Steve provided the updates here. I suppose making good progress on the points there. The one aspect is the work on the capital strategy or capital process has been impacted due to the finance team needing to focus on the statements of accounts. But that should be able to be picked up. I know that the finance team have been under some pressure just doing the statement of accounts given COVID and various other impacts. Contract management, a governance and audit committee are kept up to date on progress with that, so you should be aware of progress with that one. Improvements required to respond to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. There's 3 points there. The first one involves this committee, and an update of the terms of reference is required, and that will need to be done by May 2022. So it will come to one of the next committee meetings. The annual performance review and peer assessment is already underway. They've had a go at the updated annual performance review as a draft or dry run last year, which was quite successful, and it's combined with the usual performance review process. And then establishing corporate joint committees. Gary sort of informed me that Gwynedd County Council had taken the lead on that one, and that's very much all going on now in terms of having the meetings take place to agree statutory officers, standing orders, and agreeing a budget for the next financial year. Workforce capacity and resilience continues to be a concern. At the senior management team level, there were a couple of vacancies at the time of writing the annual governance statement. Those have been filled, and the onboarding and induction of those staff have been completed. But since then, there's one other SLT vacancy, the head of community services, and shortly the head of business and improvement. So interim arrangements are put in place for those, and the chief executive is looking at the SLT structure with proposals to pick up on any of those vacancies. So that's underway. Workforce planning is a big piece of work that HR are taking on at the moment, and I know that Audit Wales are picking up on it as part of their Springing Forward review. So with that in mind, we've held off our internal audit review because we don't want to duplicate the assurances from with Audit Wales taking on that piece of work. The new ways of working project, there's some considerations there in terms of working developments and proposals have been drafted and will be going to unions and members for consultation. Whistleblowing policy, which I think should be of interest to committee, given that you oversee that. So a review just to update. Previously, we haven't had a lot of whistleblowing concerns raised, but over the last couple of years, following a promotion exercise, there have been a few. So it's an opportunity to review the policy and update it in light with some of the things we've learned from that. And lastly, uncertainty over future funding arrangements, which mentioned previously at this meeting. Following the EU exit, there's a number of funding opportunities. The UK Levelling Up Fund, UK Community Renewal Fund, and UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And so the council has been putting in arrangements to make sure that we maximise on those opportunities and are able to claim on some of those funding opportunities. And so there's a bullet points there setting out what those arrangements are within the council to coordinate and make sure that we're carrying out what's required in terms of fulfilling the conditions of those grants. That's it. If there's any comments or questions.
Gary wanted to come in.
Sorry, I think Lisa did actually cover it, but it was just in respect of the Corporate Joint Committee. The Corporate Joint Committee met at its first meeting on the 14th of January, I think it was, where they made interim appointments to have people in the statutory roles, and to approve some standing orders, and they will meet again this Friday, the 28th, to set the budget for the forthcoming financial year and set the level of contributions for each of the authorities. So that meeting will take place on Friday.
Thank you, Gary. Ellie, is that an old hand or?
No, it's my hand now. I just want to know, have we got a date when you'll hear if the Vale of Clwyd has been successful for the Levelling Up Fund, which I think was probably old Europe money, but there you go. All right, so have we got a date, Lisa? That's all.
Don't know if anyone
Chair, not that I can give an answer to the question, but I might be best placed to answer it. We were told originally it would be in spring, which can be a lengthy time span potentially, but we're hoping sometime in March, I think, to get an answer one way or t'other.
Thank you, Julian. Okay, members, moving to the recommendations for the committee to review and comment on the progress. Can I have a recommender and seconder? Ellie, thank you. And seconded, Rhys, thank you. To the last one, agenda item number 10, Governance and Audit Committee work programme on 129 and 134. And as you'll notice on there, the next meeting is the 16th of March, which is 2 days before we enter Purda. So that meeting, we have had a chat, it will be going ahead. Is there anything we need to put in there, Lisa?
I think, Chair, just picking, sorry to cut across, Lisa. Yeah, just to confirm what you said about the meeting on the 16th of March, that will still plan to go ahead. The pre-election period, which is what we should call it now, Chair, the pre-election period will begin on the 18th of March. So we wouldn't be proposing to hold a meeting of this committee following the 18th of March until the new council, but it is a long time between now and a meeting of the committee and the new council, so we would proceed on the 16th of March. I think in general terms, under the forward work programme, there are a couple of things that have been mentioned today. I think Paul mentioned under the minutes that he would like to see somewhere in the forward work programme a date for when the Care Inspectorate Wales report would come back. And also you've asked for a separate item to go on the agenda for the Queen's Building project. So it's just really identifying appropriate times, dates for those.
And Chair, there was also the scheduling around the dates for the
statement of account
be signed off as well for next year.
Yeah. Matthew, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one observation as well from Audit Wales' perspective. I think for the meeting on the 16th, it would be useful to include the annual audit summary, which pulls together the key findings from our audit work the last calendar year. At the moment, item 8 on there refers to the annual audit plan, and I think the purpose of the report column doesn't necessarily match what the annual audit plan is. If something needs to slip, and notwithstanding what Gary just mentioned now about the timings of future audit committees, I guess the audit plan for the current year could be pushed back slightly, so we draw a line under last year's work in March and then look forward with a new committee going forward, but I'm happy to have that conversation offline.
Thank you, Matthew. Have you got those in, Lisa, to what Gary's brought in? The Queen?
Yeah, the Queen's follow-up is due in July. So the next meeting, usually September, that'll be Okay, to include it then. The CIW, I can't remember off the top of my head where would be an appropriate time for that to come back. I'd have to refresh in terms of what was in there in terms of when would be a good time.
Okay. Anything else from the floor, members, for the forward work programme? No? You happy with that then, Gary and Lisa?
Can I just mention there are a couple of reports down for the April meeting. If that's unlikely to go ahead, then the annual governance statement can go in June, and that would still be in time for the draft statement of accounts. The other two, Gary, I suppose your area.
Yeah, in terms of constitutional changes, the position is that the WLGA have commissioned some work for a new model constitution to be drafted that authorities could either adopt as is or tweak for local arrangements. I'm waiting the final version of that. So if that comes in time, then we can bring it in March. Otherwise, we'd have to bring it probably direct to council in May, but I'm hoping that we will have certainly by the middle of next month a new model constitution for it, which will effectively reflect the requirements of the Local Government and Election Wales Act, and then we can choose which bits we actually use, but it will contain all the arrangements that would be available to us should we wish to use some of those arrangements.
Okay, members? Yep. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time today. Sorry, I didn't have a wee break in between because
Chairman, there's one item, isn't there, for the Welsh Audit performance, their programme. Do we need to look at that, or it's just tagged on below? On your
Item
agenda?
11, Chair.
Item 11.
I haven't got that on my papers.
Oh, I thought you were getting carried away and excited there, Mr. Chairman. but yeah, there is one other item, item 11.
Yeah, it was a late edition, and it's an information item, I think, on the work that Audit Wales have got scheduled, and a progress update on their work plan.
Yeah.
Handed it over to me now and it's for information, yeah?
Yeah.
Anything to add to it, Martin?
No, I think you're right. It's just for information, but I thought we'd just better mention it.
Yeah, thanks very much.
As an important part of our, attendance at our committees. Cheers.
No problem. Okay. Well, thank you very much for all your time, Audit Wales, as always, and we'll see you on the 16th, which will be, well, my last meeting as chair anyway, and our last meeting as this committee. So all the best. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Chair. Goodbye.